Hey you guys, today I will take you through step by step on how to make this beautiful olive wood and epoxy charcuterie board. I will show you everything you need to know. I will show you the colors I used for this. And then I will also show you as a bonus two different ways to finish your epoxy boards. One is this glass-like finish. Do you see how pretty it is? And then the second way is if you want a more natural look where you can feel and it doesn't feel so plasticky, then this is this satin looking, and you can see the epoxy is very nice, has a nice satin sheen. So I'm going to show you how to finish boards like this and like this, plus all the step by step. Let's get right into it. Now for the wood, I chose to work with olive wood, and I have this piece that has this beautiful knots and this void in here. I really like this about this piece of olive wood, and this was a lot wider. It had a live edge on both sides. The piece looked something, oops, it looked something like this, but then I cut this wedge off, and then I will show you how I will set it up in the mold. Now you notice my olive wood looks shiny, and that is because I put a penetrating epoxy to seal the wood. Now not every wood needs to be sealed. The reason I sealed this one is because it had a lot of rot into this nut, and I didn't want any piece to break off or to have some debris floating into my epoxy, and that's why I sealed it. I'm gonna give you some other examples to see when to seal and when not to seal your wood. For example, this ancient redwood on this one, this board, it's, I just sanded. You see it's pretty perfect. It does not need to be sealed, so it looks great like that. The same thing with this olive wood. No knots, no rot, no need to be sealed. Now, on the other hand, when I will be working with this nice burl, you see all those cracks and stuff, I definitely need to seal this piece. Otherwise, I might end up with all kinds of debris into my epoxy. And also, there's another one that I sealed with penetrating epoxy. This is an ancient redwood. It was very brittle, and I just wanted to make it strong and not let any air bubble come out in my epoxy and stuff. So that's what the penetrating epoxy does. For the penetrating epoxy, I use the Total Boat penetrating epoxy. Make sure you read the instructions and you mix the ratio properly, otherwise you could definitely start a fire. Now I'm gonna bring you here close to the table, and I'm gonna show you how we're gonna arrange this piece of olive wood. I forgot to mention I'll be using the mold. The mold is from Crafted Elements, and look how sturdy that is. Very thick, very sturdy, very nice molds. I totally recommend them. I bought some before on Amazon. I got this one. I was going to make lids for the boxes, and I mean, look how flimsy that is. I mean, this thing is gonna rip after 2 uses. So I'm gonna use the Crafted Element molds. I'm not sure what size this is. I think it's an 18 by 12. So it's about 18 by 12. And the way my pieces are going to go in is something like this. I think that is going to be very, very nice. And then we'll have the epoxy here in the middle. So, but before we put this wood in there and we mix the epoxy, I need to prep my mold. And when I say prep the mold, I mean we need to use a mold release. I bought this one from Crafted Elements. And by the way, I bought this mold myself. It was not sent to me. I purchased it with my own money, and I've been using it with success, and I really love it. So that's why I want to share this with you. So I'm going to go outside and spray this all over my mold. That way it will prevent the epoxy sticking to the mold. If you don't spray with mold release, what happens is the epoxy will bond with the mold. You can still pull out the epoxy with your board and whatever, but it kind of rips a little bit of the mold, and it's not going to last you as long. So you want to apply this to keep the longevity of your board. So I'm going to go do this, and then we'll come back and I'll show you what epoxy I'll mix. Now for the epoxy, I'll be using this designer epoxy, and I'll have to tell you, I have never used this epoxy before. So if the project gets ruined, well, so be it, as this is more like a testing project because I have some more expensive wood that I want to do. And I want to make sure this is the right epoxy for it, so we'll try it on this project. Now the problems I seem to be having with epoxy is you have to choose the right epoxy for the project. And there are many kinds of epoxy. There's tabletop epoxy, there's penetrating epoxy as we saw, there's the multi-purpose epoxy, then there's deep pour and super deep pour, slow curing, extra slow curing. And what happens is the ones that is multi-purpose, well, the tabletop one you can only put up to 1/4 inch or less. The tabletop one usually you can go to a 1/2 inch. And then as you go into the deep pour, you can go up to 2 inches and some extra deep pour to 4 inches and so on. Now, the ones that are fastest curing is the ones that are the thinnest, of course. So like a multi-purpose one, you can only pour 1/2 inch at a time. So if you do a board and you put 1 inch, it will overheat, it will create this exothermic reaction where it like cures prematurely. So instead of taking 24 to 48 hours for your epoxy to cure, it will flash cure in just an hour or two. And it will create a lot of bubbles, it will foam, it will crack, bad things will happen. So you do not want to use that for a project like this. So then there we go to the deep pour. Deep pour, you want something that works for the depth that you're working with. And the reason why that is I used it for a board. I use epoxy, this really slow curing for really deep epoxy. You can go up to 5 inches in one pour. And what happened is I put different colors. I think I used 4 different colors and they all looked so nice together. But then when I put it in, because it took so long to cure, I mean, it took like 24 hours later, it was like peanut butter consistency. So because of that, the epoxy is very thin and it has so much time to just sit there that all the colors just kind of merged together, and I ended up with one uniform color. It was kind of like a muddy color. It didn't even look good. The color was not pretty, and to this day, that is the ugliest board I have ever made. So really deep pour epoxies do not work for the kind of work I do. Now, if you do something like you're encasing flowers, then you would want that. Or if you're just doing river tables where you want clear in the middle or just one uniform color, those are perfect for that. For me, I do want to have those nice exothermic swirls and stuff, but I do not want bubbles. I do not want it to flash cure. So I need something that is kind of fast curing, but deep pour and not too slow curing. So is this the one? I don't know. This one, it says you can pour up to 2 inches. So we'll see. So I'm going to mix these two guys. I'm going to mix in some colors. After I mix the epoxy, I will put it into a vacuum chamber to remove all the bubbles. And I'll choose some colors and I will see you after, and we'll pour it and we'll see what kind of colors we're getting. So I mixed up the epoxy, the colors are mixed in, and right now my epoxy is sitting in my vacuum pressure, is it a pressure? No, a vacuum pot. And what that vacuum pot is going to do is to pull out all the bubbles from the epoxy so we don't get any bubbles into our project. Now I'm going to do something I usually don't like to do, and that is I am going to show you the colors I chose. And the reason why I don't like to show this is because, not because I'm afraid you're gonna steal my recipe or my colors, it's just because by doing so, if I show you my colors, and if you like them, you're gonna do this. And by doing this, you are not finding your own style. So I want you to experiment with colors. I want you to find your own signature colors, your own style, and me showing you my colors and my style, it's not gonna do you any favors. But for this video, I will show you my colors. So I use this bronze stone color. So that's one of my colors. Then I used this white pearl. And I mixed all these colors with just a little bit of pigment because I wanted to see through the epoxy. I wanted to see those voids and stuff. So I used some tropical blue. And then I've also used this blue-green from Beaver Dust. And I've never used this one before. This is my first time, so we'll see what it looks like. And then after I mix my colors, I also left some epoxy in my bucket uncolored, because this way, if I feel like my project needs a little bit of this or a little bit of that more, then I have some extra epoxy, or if it's too opaque and I can't see through it, then I can just put some of this in. So that's a little trick for you. Mix a little bit extra, keep some aside, because it's easier to see as you're working with the project what color is needed. So now we're gonna go into my mechanical room, which is pretty loud in there, so I'm not going to talk, but I will film it. And what we're gonna do is I'll put the wood onto the form. Then I have a 15-pound dumbbell that I put some tuck tape on it. Tuck tape, if you're not familiar with it, it looks something like this. You can buy it. I think Crafted Elements sells it. I think Amazon sells it. And this thing, epoxy does not stick to it. So I covered my weight into this, so I make sure it doesn't stick to the epoxy. And I'm gonna place that weight on top of my wood to weigh it down, that way the wood doesn't float to the top. So we'll put the wood into the form, we'll put the weight on it, and then we'll start putting the colors and we'll see what we get. I'm not gonna talk through this, you're just gonna watch me do. And normally when I'm done pouring the colors, you guys, if you've been following me for a while, you know I would do a time lapse just to show you how the colors are merging into each other and so on. I'm not gonna do that this time because my phone is almost out of charge, and immediately after I film this video, I will film a video about how making that cross from the Crafted Elements. So I started that project a while back, so today I'll be sanding it and putting a top coat, and I need my phone for that, but I will be taking pictures as the epoxy is doing its magic from today till I go to bed. I'll take some pictures in the morning, and I'll post those on the end here so you can see what's happening. And then I will see you back when the epoxy is cured and we need to demold. All right, you guys, our board is cured and it's ready to come out of the mold. Now that mold from Crafted Elements makes it super easy to demold, so let's do that. And then we need to flatten the board, we need to put the profile around the edges, cut it to size, and put a finish on it. And I have not decided what I'm going to do for the finish yet because I want to see what it looks like when I get it out of the mold first. So let's do that. So first I will loosen all the edges, and because we use that spray for the molds, nothing should be sticking, everything should be coming out really easily. All right. Very nice. Oh, I like it. Okay. That is the back of it. And that is the front of it. Now it's time to flatten the board and sand it or plane it to remove all this epoxy from the top so we get to the bare wood. And the best way to do this is to use a router sled. I have two router sleds, one that I've made myself and one that I purchased. I purchased the Woodpecker's router sled. And the one that I made myself, it works really well, but it works with my bigger Bosch router, which is usually attached to my router table on the router lift. And it's not so convenient to get out of the router table, so I got the Woodpecker's one to use it with my small DeWalt like palm router, but that one just doesn't work so well. So I'm not going to use a router sled, and I'm not going to use a planer because my planer has a horrible snipe. So I'm just going to run this board through the drum sander, remove all this extra epoxy, and make sure the board is flat. All right, you guys, I apologize for the background noise, but my dust collector usually hums after I turn it off for 10 minutes or so. So here is our board. This is the front, and I just ran it through the drum sander. I do have 60 grit paper on the drum sander. As you can see, we have zero imperfections. Everything looks very, very nice. And now what I will be doing is, well, first of all, I want to bring it to my table saw. Let me move you in closer. And on my table saw, on my cast iron, I want to make sure that it doesn't have any wobble onto it, because you do not want a board that has a wobble. That's the most annoying thing. So this one, it's dead flat, so I'm very happy with that. What I'll be doing now is take this through my table saw, and I will cut off these edges, the epoxy edges that, you know, sipped behind my wood. So I'll be trimming all these edges and make sure my board is square. And then after I do that, I will set my blade at 45 degrees, and I'll put a small, very small chamfer on all the sides, top and bottom. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll see you right after. So my board is cut to size, and you see I put these chamfers on the edges, small chamfers on both sides, and I just think that brings a little bit of interest. So this is the way our board is looking so far. And what I will do now is on the back of it, so let's see which one is the back. This one is the back. So on the back, I will put a border of blue tape, so that way when my tabletop epoxy runs over, it will stop on that blue tape, and then I can peel the blue tape and make my sanding easier. So what I decided we'll do for the top and the sides, we'll use tabletop epoxy, so that way you see how to finish epoxy board to make it really shiny. And then on the back, we'll do my other go-to finish, which is the satin finish. That is my favorite finish. But for this one, because the colors, the epoxy is a little bit muted, I want to put that top coat of epoxy just to make it a little bit more colorful and bright. So I'm going to put the blue tape, and then we'll mix the tabletop epoxy, and I will show you how to do that. So you can see I put this blue tape underside, and I left a little bit of room in there from the edge to the tape because I want that you know, to really wrap around. Now for the tabletop epoxy, I have tried a few different brands in the past. I've used Total Boat tabletop epoxy, and I have used a lot of super clear tabletop epoxy. So those used to be my go-to epoxies when it came to tabletop. But then recently, this, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Texpert or Tixpert, I think it's Texpert. This company reached out to me, and they wanted me to try their brand new tabletop epoxy, which is this one. So they did send it to me free of charge to try it, and I have tried it on one product, and I really, really love it. It is really hard and non-yellowing, scratch resistant. And most of all, what I like about it is that it's easier to work with than the Super Clear or the Total Boat. I feel like it mixes a little bit easier, and it has less bubbles, and it's just easier to manage in general. So it became my go-to tabletop epoxy, so that's what I'll be using for this board. Now this tabletop epoxy, it mixes 1:1 by volume ratio. So for this board, I really only need about 4 ounces, but I will mix 6 ounces. And before I pour the epoxy on the top of this board, what I will do is clean it with isopropyl alcohol, because I do not want any dust on this before I pour my epoxy. All right, you guys, here is my epoxy. I have 6 ounces. I mixed it with a stirring stick. You do not want to use a paddle on your drill. And now I'm just going to pour it in the center of my board. Like I said, this epoxy is really easy to work with and has a lot less bubble than my other two. So that's why I like it. So now that I have this epoxy here in the middle, I am going to use my hands. I do have gloves, and I have another pair of gloves set right next to my project because I will need to change it in a little bit. So now I'm just going to tap, tap, tap motion, go around and kind of spread this epoxy to the side, and then I'll make sure I'll run my fingers onto the edges, make sure that all the edges are getting coated. And you will feel it. I don't even need to look at my edges, because I can feel it if it slides easily, if it's slippery, if it grabs onto my glove. That probably means that, you know, I need to put some more in there because it's just the wood. It's been 2 days since we poured the top coat, and the top coat, it's dry, and look how pretty that is, a glass-like finish. Our board is looking spectacular, but it is not done. So this is a closer look at what it looks like. And what we need to do now is to remove this blue tape, sand it, and finish the back. So this, I'm going to show you a different finish for the back, and this is the finish that I usually prefer to do, and a lot of my customers love that finish just because you can see the wood, you can feel the wood. It feels a little bit less plasticky, and it's just a really nice finish. So that's what I'm going to show you. But first we have to remove the blue tape. So I'm going to move you close to my bench. Now I put my board on top of a foam and some paper towels, and because this board is dry and it's cured, it didn't reach its hardness yet. It could take up to a week for the top coat to really get really hard and durable. So I still have to baby it a little bit. I have a heat gun. I'll be warming up this epoxy that dripped over my blue tape. I have some tweezers if I need to help to lift up the blue tape, and we will be removing the blue tape. Blue tape is removed, and we are left with these edges that now we need to sand. So I'll start sanding with 100 grit sandpaper, and I will go all the way to 600 and stop at 600. Actually, I might stop at 400. I will do it so from 100 grit, I'll go to 400 and then stop and show you the next step. My board, I just finished sanding with 400 grit. I will wipe off the dust, and now it's time, just like with any other cutting board, we have to raise the grain. Otherwise, the first time this board will be washed, the wood part will become rough to the touch. So what we will do, we'll just spray it with some water and then let it dry, and then we'll go with the 600 grit paper and give it one more sanding. So I'm going to do that, and then I will see you when the board is all dry. The board is dry, and I already gave it the sanding with 600 grit, and it's nice and smooth. Now it's time to seal the wood. You want to seal the wood, otherwise the board will end up cracking in time. I'll be using some food grade mineral oil, just like with any other cutting board. You want to seal the wood, and then we'll move on to the next step. But for right now, I'm just going to put some mineral oil, let it soak in as much as you want. If I need to add more, I will add more. And look at that beautiful wood. It looks so, so nice. The grain is fantastic, and this is just the back of the board. And don't be afraid to put the mineral oil on the epoxy. It won't really soak in because it's plastic, but it will make it look nice. So I'm gonna let this soak for a few minutes, wipe off the excess, and then I'll see you for the next step. The board took as much oil as you wanted, and then I wipe off the excess, and now we're ready to move into the next step. I'll tell you the next two steps so I don't have to keep stopping the video and talk over it. So the first step is to use this abrasive paste. This is food grade abrasive paste. And what this is going to do is remove all those micro scratches from my epoxy, the ones that the 600 grit sandpaper left behind. So I'm gonna put some of this on with a rag, use a buffer, buff it on. Then I'm gonna wipe off all the excess, and then we will seal everything with this Cornuba wax finish. And this should give us a nice satin finish and make everything look rich and beautiful. So I'm gonna buff this one as well. So I'm gonna use this one, buff it, wipe off the excess, use this one and buff it. And here is our finished board. Now you can purchase it on my website at www.skylarewing.store. And you can also purchase those finishes, the abrasive paste and the wax if you're interested. But for now, thank you so much for watching. My name is Skylar Ewing, and I'll see you in my next video.